my name is Gamedog, and today I'll be talking about a new Magicka Sorcerer build that I've been working on for the past couple of weeks. This is kind of a funny little thing I thought was quite unique, and it really centers around small scale and solo PvP as usual, and about stacking high spell damage while maintaining constant pressure on your enemies. So let's get into this build here. First up, I'll just show you the sets I'm running, and then I'll tell you what the gimmick of this setup is. Because it is quite unusual, and I don't see a lot of players using this, so I hope that it'll help you find something different in the Magicka Sorcerer that not a lot of players are running. So first up here we got Infernal Guardian. This is our first set. This set here has a one piece of Max Magicka, and I'm sorry for the trait, it's pretty bad, but I'm not doing that many Undaunted pledges, not as many as I should at least, so the traits can kind of vary here. But again, as long as you have about 1.2, 1.3 critical critical resistance on a sorcerer, it's fine. You know, you rely on your shield stacking and not too much about taking damage yourself. As you can see, my max health is 21.5, so it's not insanely large. But let's get into the sets. So a one-piece Max Magicka and a two-piece, when you use a damage shield ability, which is obviously a very big deal when it comes to the Magicka Sorcerer, you'll have a 50% chance of looping 3 mortars over 2 seconds to the furthest target from you, each dealing 7.2k flame damage to all enemies within 5 meters of the blast area, and this effect can occur every 6 seconds. So this will basically, every time we shield stack and someone hit us, we'll be able to maintain some constant damage on them. And this 7.2k tooltip is not it's not what it really deals in PvP. Obviously, it'll be scaled down a lot to like 2 or 3k damage at max. But especially if you're fighting vampires, this can be really nice, and it can also kind of pinpoint a direction as to where your enemies are. Even though you're trying to line of sight them, it'll still jump in like through rocks and walls and whatever. So it's giving you a nice sense of direction as to where your enemies are, and keep a constant threat on them. Now the flame damage is a really smart thing that I'll go into later, and this is the gimmick about this build really. So next up here we got Burning Spellweave. This is a set that is commonly used among PvE players, especially last patch. I haven't really seen a lot of people use it this patch, and it was usually used by Magicka DKs in PvP. I haven't really seen it been used by sorcerers, so I'd like to think this is kind of a new thing to try and use here. But this build has a 2-piece Max Magicka, 3-piece spell damage, and a 4-piece spell critical, which is kind of nice. The 2, 3, 4 is pretty nice, and then we got a 5-piece. When you deal damage with a flame damage ability, you have a 15% chance to apply burning status effect to your enemy, which increases your spell damage by 500 for 8 seconds. This effect can occur every 12 seconds. So the nice thing about this is that it will proc off of all our flame damage abilities, which in turn is pretty much every flame damage source. So this includes our flame staff. It includes abilities like Crushing Shock, it includes Shooting Star, and it'll actually include our Infernal Guardian. And this is the gimmick about this setup here, that Infernal Guardian, which will proc while we're using our shields, which we'll be using at all times pretty much, will actually start proccing Burning Spellweave and give us that extra spell damage for 8 seconds. And 8 seconds is enough time to really start working on an enemy, or possibly even kill them within the 8 seconds. So that's the gimmick on this setup here. That's the thing. The purpose of this setup. Next up here we got Willpower. We got 4 pieces left if we include weapons on front and back bar. So I chose to go with Willpower here for a 2 and 3 piece extra Max Magicka and extra spell damage. And as you can see, the enchants on these are 2 Magicka Recovery and 1 spell damage. You can make this into a Magicka Recovery setup. You can make this into a spell damage enchant and actually gain upwards of 3.4k fully buffed spell damage. However, you will suffer severely in Magicka Recovery. However, I do have a few tricks you can use to maintain your Magicka, even though that you'll be getting pretty low on the recovery. However, it's all about how you play it. So, but this is the setup I choose to go with, considering how I play. You can switch it about as you want to. Again, this is just an example of how I would play this character. And obviously you can change what you want to this if you prefer to play with other things here. So we got 2 recovery and 1 spell damage on willpower here, and for the weapons we just got normal weapons, whatever you have in stock really, as long as it's sharpened front bar and defending back bar. Now I chose to go with the Oblivion damage enchant for the front bar because this patch pretty much is the strongest solution. You could go with a weapon damage enchant. This is really nice and will stack with Burning Spellweave and Major Sorcery and all these things to give you, like, you can get almost 4k spell damage fully buffed if you use this on your front bar. However, you will lose the Oblivion damage enchant, which again is basically the king of enchants this patch at least. It deals 2.4, almost 2.5k irresistible damage. You can't build resistance to it. Not even damage shields will save you from this damage, really. I've seen sorcerers try to use healing ward and then me just proccing this thing and they'll die anyway. It's almost dirty, and I don't know what they're gonna do about it next patch. I've heard some things about them wanting to nerf a bunch of things. So if they nerf the Oblivion damage enchant, definitely the weapon damage enchant will be the go-to if they do nerf the Oblivion enchant here. On the back bar we're running poisons. Obviously because poisons is playing a big part of PvP these days, and there's a variety to choose between. I usually would run these here, the Magicka damage poisons. However, I recently changed to these, which I feel a lot more comfortable using. These both increases the Magicka and stamina cost of your enemy's abilities, but they also refund you 238 Magicka and stamina every second for 3.5 seconds. So this is actually helping to refill your bars. And it has a 20% proc chance on all light attacks. So the thing about this is that you place it on your back bar with the restoration staff, and when you switch bars, which I've done because I want to reach my curse sometimes, that's why I've put it on my back bar here, and maybe harness Magicka, is that you'll be doing some light attacks while you're switching bars and animation cancel via your bar switch. So when you bar switch, you'll be doing a light attack or something just to proc this here. This is really nice, both for draining your enemy and for refilling your own bars when it comes to stamina and Magicka. So that's our setup here. So the gimmick of this setup is that you can use Infernal Guardian to proc Burning Spellweave and get a huge amount of spell damage stacked that you can use. Of course, you can stack with Major Sorcery and thereby get a huge amount of damage in an instant, pretty much. And this will be dealing a constant threat to enemy as you're dealing with them if you're outnumbered or in any other situations. This build is not really meant for bigger groups, considering it's really focused on your self-survivability and so on. But you can play in smaller groups of up to like 4 or 5 enemies, obviously. However, tweaking a few things would be working a lot better with this setup if you choose to play in smaller groups. So quickly I'll just show you the stats here. We got about 40k max Magicka, which is about where you want to go, I feel. That's where I feel most comfortable, because it in turn will result in you having nearly 20k shields, as you can see. And that's where I feel most comfortable. You can run with less and more, depending on what you want. All my enchants on my body is obviously Magicka, as well as all my attribute points here. Next up we got health. It's a bit low, it's 21.5k. I don't feel like I need more health than this, because you are relying a lot of on your damage shields, and you really don't want to fall lower than 50% health without you using like a healing ward or something to keep your shields up. That's your priority. We don't got a lot of critical resistance, we don't got a lot of physical or spell resistance. The damage shields is the real gimmick here, is the thing that we want to focus mostly on keeping up. And it's all about training your rotations and how you apply these shields, because they don't have the longest duration really. At least not anymore. They used to have, but again, if you can maintain your damage shields, you don't need a lot of health really. Next up we got a max stamina. It's on 14k, and it's this high because of the tri-stat food we're using. Now the 14, almost, yeah, it's like 14.5 almost k max stamina is helping us with both CC breaking and roll dodging and dealing with all the things we have in Cyrodiil, but it also can be used in combination with dark conversion, as you can see here. It's a pretty low costing stamina to Magicka refund ability. This will both heal you for a bit and refund a lot of your Magicka back to your bar, at the cost of some stamina obviously. And that's also why we have a we would have a bit more stamina recovery, which I've been focusing on in my champion points here. Not too much though, but I will get into how we can manage this, because right now it might seem as like, how the hell would you manage running with that lower recovery and using dark conversion, but I'll get into that. And it's really useful in keeping your low recovery, Magicka recovery here, running and keeping yourself sustained. And this is our next thing. Magicka recovery is a bit low to start with, but again, if you maintain your poisons, if you maintain dark conversion, heavy attacks maybe even, then you don't really need too much recovery. It all depends on how you play it, obviously. Next up here we got stamina. Health recovery is not really anything to talk about. We're a vampire, so our health recovery is naturally non-existent. But our stamina recovery is a bit higher. It's 735, so not insanely high, but it's a bit higher than usual due to Magicka and champion points. Spell damage, as it seems right now, is not too high. When we proc it, here, we'll actually get about 2.3, and we'll spell weave, we'll get about 3k solid. But if you chose, as I say, to remove one of these Magicka recovery enchants and put a spell damage enchant on this, you will be able to reach those 3300 spell damage. Spell critical, we're doing fine. It's about 35%. It's not really too important. A lot of people are wearing NPen, but you need to remember, even though people are wearing full NPen, critical damage still deals more damage than usual attacks. So having a good critical is not game breaking, but it's definitely good to have. And as you can see here, Spell Weave does give it a bit more critical, which in turn helps us getting up here. We're running the Astronaut Wonderstone. This is giving us increased Magicka recovery, as you can see here, and that's pretty much the stats setup. Next up here are the skills. I have been going through these on my previous Magicka Sorcerer videos, so I'll just be going over them quickly. First up we got Crystal Fragments. It's a bit expensive ability, but it is our heavy hitting, one of our heavy hitting abilities. We in fact have two of them. As far as I'd classify as heavy hitting, we have Hunting Curse and Sea Frags here, Crystal Fragments, as well as Endless Fury when people get low enough on health. So these are our three hardest hitting abilities, besides the ultimate, obviously, which I'll get into in a moment. So you won't be using this to hardcast it. You'll be waiting for it to give you the 50% less cost free cast, which basically procs off of you using any of your abilities here. So you have a chance of just getting a free cast where you can just use it without... it's pretty hard, I don't have a dummy to test it on. Should really have thought about that. But when you use abilities, you'll get a free cast with this that you can proc at any time you want, really. So you can just fire it at any time you want at 50% of the cost. Now, this can be used in combination with Spellweave when Spellweave is up and proccing. And you'll be able to see Spellweave's 8-second duration by your hands turning a bit orangey. So when your hands are orange and you can see them light up because you have a crystal frag ready, that's the kind of that's the opportunity where you need to get your sea frags in. So you can use that in combination to hit some really hard hitting bursts. I checked it with Spellweave procced, and this can hit about 16k tooltip with Spellweave up. So that's pretty nice damage from that one. Next up we got Crushing Shock. This is a bit of a spammable ability. It's not really dealing too much burst, but it's keeping constant pressure. And when someone is trying to rest someone or doing a cast time ability, this could actually be someone trying to use Dark Conversion or Dark Deal, you'll be able to stun them or interrupt them with Crushing Shock. So this is both good for taking out people who are trying to resurrect their friends, or people who are trying to recover resources, or maybe even hardcast sea frags. You'll be amazed of how many people who are trying to do cast time abilities while you have a sorcerer with Crushing Shock around. So pretty good at dealing constant range damage. It has a 36 meters range. It has a low cost, and it's a good spammable just to keep some constant pressure. Next up here we got Hardened Ward. This is our main ward. It has an 8k, almost 9k damage shield for 6 seconds that will absorb 33% additional damage. Now, this is our main ward out of the two wards we have. We're using Harness Magic on the back bar and Hardened Ward on the front bar. As you can see, Hardened Ward has a 3k cost almost, while Harness Magicka has a 4k cost almost. So Hardened ward is definitely less costly and has a bigger ward, so it will be your main ward to go to. Now you can stack these two for an extra large damage shield. However, don't spam this too much, it has a high cost as well as this. Use it when you need to, but keep it on at all times. It's definitely really nice to evade pressure, to evade like damage and keep your enemies at bay. Really, you can take constant pressure with this while still being able to deal pressure with your crushing shock or any of your abilities. Especially if you have curse running or C-frag ready or something, you can quickly turn the fight around from getting pressure to really dealing hard burst to your enemy. Next up here we got Endless Fury. Now I chose this morph of the execute because this is our execute, by the way. You apply this abilities to an enemy and it'll deal some upfront damage, and when they get below 20% health, it'll deal an extra burst which usually kills them or at least deals a significant amount of damage. This is really nice to use with like C-frags or Haunting Curse to basically get enemies really low on health and just have this thing proccing and they're basically done. They don't even have time to react for it. Now I chose this morph because it refunds you Magicka when you kill an enemy. And I've realized it's a surprising amount of times where this is actually the finisher I usually apply that usually kills people for me. So having it restore Magicka 4.4k is actually pretty nice, and I felt it helped out. It helped me out in the situation of me not having too much recovery here. So that's one of the things that play a role in keeping myself sustained. Next up here we got Power Surge. This is our major sorcery buff. The reason I'm choosing this is because you can, one, use it as a heal. The heal is not too significant in PvP. However, it will keep your healing running when you're using wards. We don't really have any other heals besides Dark Conversion and Healing Ward. But if you're just fighting and you're not falling too low on health, this will actually keep your health running up and high at all times pretty much. It's like having extra recovery. So it pretty much ticks every second because of your critical damage. So it's pretty nice. And the other thing that I like, the reason I like it is because of the fact that if you take an ability like Entropy, Entropy needs a target to proc Major Sorcery. This doesn't. You can get yourself behind cover and stack up your wards and your major buffs and so on without needing a target to latch onto. Plus the duration is 33 seconds. That's a lot compared to what the duration of this is, 20 seconds. So you'll have 1/3 more time up running with Power Surge. Yeah, and you'll get your weapon and spell damage running high as well. So a nice self buff. It's a bit expensive, so don't spam it unless you really need it. And again, the 30-second delay will keep you running for a while until you need to use it again. So next up here we got our first ultimate, Shooting Star. The reason I chose this ultimate here in the major skill line is both because of the fact that it has a chance to give us Empower, and it will give us increased max Magicka and Magicka recovery and so on. You have all these bonuses added to it, but besides that, it has a really hard hitting dot that comes after and will hit for about 4 or 5k damage every second for 11, almost 12 seconds. And it will generate ultimate depending on how many people it hits. Now the thing about this is that this morph deals flame damage, and as I said before, flame damage would help us proc Burning Spellweave. So because the dot lasts as long as it does when this hits, and it also deals upfront flame damage of like 15k, and buffed it'll deal 17k entry damage. Like you can stun an enemy with like Streak and then hit them with this and it'll just have a clean hit of that 17k tooltip. Really nice. Has it's a generous cost. I think it's 170 ultimate. It's not too high. I think it usually used to be 200, but this is definitely a bit lower, and it's gonna help us a bit. Even though our backbar ultimate is really cheap. I'll get into that later. But the fact that this will activate Burning Spellweave is really what we're after. So when this launches and hit and people maybe stand in the area of the AoE, it'll almost have a 100% chance to just proc Spellweave, and you'll get so much extra damage out of throwing this down. Especially if there's multiple enemies. And you can also, as I said, you can generate 9 ultimate for each enemy hit. Which, if you hit like 3 or 4 enemies, it'll give you a good head start on already being able to apply Light's Champion. So you can almost directly go from that, and then maybe 6-7 seconds later you can immediately use Light's Champion here. So that's the front bar. Next up we got a back bar here. The first ability is Haunting Curse. The reason we have this on our back bar is because I want to maintain a constant bar switch. Because on the back bar here we got poisons, and we want to apply those as often as we can. These are really nice to deal with really resourceful or tanky enemies. It could also just be people who are roll dodging a lot, like Night Blades. Dealing with them, they're not going to be able to cloak as often, they're not going to be able to use many stamina abilities. It really kills people quite fast and kills their ability to use abilities and move around and so on. Plus, if you use it in combination here with Siphoner, you'll also get a lot of you'll be basically reducing their recovery and increasing their cost so much that they'll flop dead at some point. So it can be really dangerous to get hit by one of these here, and that's why we're using them. It gives you a significant advantage. Next up here we got Streak. Oh, I didn't need to tell about Haunting Curse. Haunting Curse deals 2 bursts of damage, one coming at 3.5 seconds and the other one occurring at 8.5. So when you apply this, it'll tick once and twice, and then it's done and you'll need to reapply it. The cost is not too high and the range is really nice. Plus of the fact that if you apply this to a person who's stealthed or cloaked or something, it'll expose them when it pops. Plus that you can use this pop here, this 10k proc, in combination with C-Frags or Endless Fury or Shooting Star to just really deal so much burst. And that's what I've been saying even in my last build video, that the Magicka Sorcerer has it has so much built-in burst in its abilities, and those are really what you're using when you are finishing off enemies quickly, especially if you're outnumbered, that you need to take care of targets before they become a threat to you and can pressure you, and you'll obviously end up losing because of that. Next up here we got Streak. This is our getaway, I'd almost say, but it also can be a bit more aggressive as an upfront stun. The reason I took this over the other morph is that it can, one, deal a good amount of damage. It's not too much in PvP, it's like 1 or 2k. But the other thing is that it'll stun your enemy for 1.5 seconds, which is usually enough for like C-Frags, or to use an Endless Fury, or maybe even you can land a Shooting Star and then just in the moment it hits Streak and they'll be able to not block it and so on. So you can use this in combination with bursts as well, and it'll be able to stun enemies up front and deal a bit of damage as well. Don't spam this too often. The cost increases by 50% every time you use it, and it can be within 4 seconds, yeah. So you don't want to be spamming this, especially with the recovery we have. But that's why we have Dark Conversion, and I'll get into that in a moment. Now this is our pretty much only reliable stun. C-Frags is a stun, and the same for Shooting Star, but it's not consistent enough. Streak will be our most consistent stun if you want to set someone, if you want to make someone CC break, obviously gnaw away on their stamina and keep them pressured. Streak is the only ability we have for that, so that's why we're using this morph as well. And I feel it's just as useful to get away with. You're really able to just move around really fast. It gives you a lot of mobility to use this ability here. So next up we got Harness Magicka. This is quite costly. It lasts for 6 seconds. It's the same duration as your Hardened Ward, so that's pretty good. You can keep those two running at the same time. Pretty much they'll have same duration, as I said. Now this ward has a bit of a smaller size. It's not as big as your Hardened Ward. As you can see here, if I use Hardened Ward, it's going to give me an 11k shields, and this will only give me, there we go, 8k. So they have a bit of a difference in shield size. Now the thing we can use Harness Magicka for is that when you get damaged with Magicka, with any Magicka ability or spell damage, so to say, any spell damage based ability, you'll be healing, you'll be restoring about 1000 Magicka for each piece of, and it'll be increased for each piece of light armor worn. This is going to keep the efficiency of Harness Magicka at its best. So if you're fighting multiple people who are using spell damage based abilities, you'll be able to get a lot of Magicka back for using this. And it can, an example is if you're fighting a Magicka DK, using this shield will pretty much give you more Magicka back that you'll be using to cast the shield. So this is working like to almost refill your Magicka bars. Now against stamina players, this has a bit of a disadvantage. You won't be able to heal anything off of them, and it's really costly to use the shield. So against Magicka players, I prefer to use Hardened Ward mainly, because it's bigger and it costs less, and it doesn't have the return, because the return obviously won't function if you're fighting a stamina player. But if you're finding any Magicka players, this is going to keep you running for a long time. So it's really nice for that in those situations. So next up here we've got Healing Ward. This is sort of backup ward pretty much, and it's the life-saving ability we have because of our points here in the Bastion that we have in our champion tree here. The size of the shield will be much bigger, and it will basically, as you can see here, its shield can grow up to 300% of its size depending on the target's wounds. So the lower health you get, the bigger the shield will get. As you can see here, when it expires, it heals you for 150% of the remaining ward strength, which is a really big bunch of healing. Now you use this when you get low on health and really low on health, and really not before that. I personally don't think it's beneficial before you fall below at least 50% health. Before that, it basically just acts like a normal damage shield and has the same cost as Harness without the Magicka return. So use this when you get low on health, but when you get low on health, this will give you so much shielding. It'll save your life again. So really bread and butter, and the reason we're running a restoration staff in the first place, besides the ultimate here. So next up here we got Dark Conversion. Now this is a ability that can refund Magicka at the cost of stamina. Now Dark Conversion has a pretty low cost. It's only 2000 stamina, so it doesn't cost too much. And a lot of people will probably say, oh yeah, but you've got way too low recovery to run that. And I sort of disagree, because the 14k max stamina I have is, I'll never really get to use all of it. If I roll dodge once or twice, as you can see, the cost, like, it goes down to 60%, but it's not really damaging too much. In fact, you could run 2-stat food and you could be fine in PvP with only like 10,000 stamina. So I personally think that the 4,000 extra we have here would actually enable us to use Dark Conversion a bit more. And the fact that I have put some extra recovery into my stam recovery here, and I've also thought about using poisons that are giving me stamina back, will help me keep track of still having good resource management here on my stamina bar. And as you can see, from 100% I can use Dark Conversion once, twice, I can even use it 3 times, and it'll only get down to 78%. Like it's basically, it costs me nothing to use. So I'd say use it if you can, and if you're running Tri-Stat, you can still use this ability without draining your stamina completely. Now you will need to keep your stamina above those 10,000. If you get below that, that's the danger zone. You don't want to be too far down there, because then you won't be able to CC break, you won't be able to roll dodge and do those things you need. Even blocking can sometimes be a thing you'll need to do. Like if you get hit by a meteor, you'll need to block that attack or you're gonna get stunned. So use this, but be careful not to get too far down. I know a lot of people will use this with Amberplasm, and it's a really nice setup as well. I give props to people who do that, yeah. But you can still run this if you're not running Amberplasm. You don't necessarily need to. However, you do need to be very careful that you don't get too low on stamina. That's also the reason I'm running Tri-Stat pots here. It's to refund both Magicka, stamina, and health. And as you can see here, it'll actually give us extra recovery for stamina and Magicka and health that'll last for 36.6 seconds. Now, I don't even have any points into my alchemy here, which will actually increase the duration of these, I think. Yeah. So you can actually, if you level this up and you put some points into the passives, your potions will help you a lot more as well. But besides that, it'll actually give you more Magicka recovery. I can just test this actually. If we look here, take apart, and my stam recovery is now 800 and mag recovery is 1800. So not too bad, especially if you keep these running. And you know, you can obviously, this will last for, you can see the duration of these 20% expansions will last for those 36 seconds, which is a pretty long duration. So you can pretty much keep this at like a 70% uptime, which will keep your stats flowing for a while, and also works towards being able to use Dark Conversion without falling too low on stamina. As well as, you know, if you fall too low, using this will grant you 7,000 stamina immediately, so you will be able to endure getting too low on your stamina while using Dark Conversion. This is also really nice if you're traveling, like if you're just streaking and you need some quick stats back. It's really nice to use there. As well as if you're in a fight and you all of a sudden you run low on Magicka. If you can streak out of there, get those 5 seconds for yourself behind something, line of sighting a bit, you can get a lot of resources back by using Dark Conversion. So it's really nice to use if you can drop out of a mid-fight and just get your resources back. So on our last ability here we have Light Champion. This is the ultimate for the Restoration skill tree. Now the thing about this is that it has a very low cost. It has a duration of only 5 seconds, but still the low cost really works towards you being able to use this every like 10 seconds even. And as I said, if you can drop this into a bunch of enemies, you'll almost have it ready when it has been dropped immediately. So this will this will heal you for 800 health every second for 5 seconds. In PvP that's about 8,000. In PvP that's about 4,000 every second. Now the other thing that it does, and the reason I've chosen this morph, is that it, for those 5 seconds, actually increases your critical damage done, which will help us because we do have a bit of critical 38 here. But the other thing it'll do is that it'll actually reduce our damage taken by 30%. And you can see this buff as this kind of light on you. And you can see the buffs here down in the corner of the screen down there. So they'll last for those 5 seconds until they're done. This is a really good ability you can use to get away. If you have like, I don't know, 10 people following you and you're getting mauled down, use this and just go into permanent streak mode and don't look back. This can really get you out of really shitty situations really well and really fast. So it's a really nice ability. It has a low cost. It's your getaway tool #1 besides Healing Ward. When everything has gone to shit, this is your way out. So always keep enough ultimate up for this one. It's really, really nice to use. So that is our abilities on both bars here. I don't think I've missed anything. Of course you want every passive in every skill tree you can, especially in those you're using, but there's really no passives you should prefer. You should really just get out there and get it done. Get out there and get all the passives you need. Next up here is Mage's Guild. This requires you to go and farm lore books. If you don't want to use Shooting Star, you can go ahead and use other abilities, such as like Destrold will actually help you as well. This will do flame damage, but I don't know. The ultimate cost is a bit high, and I feel it's a bit too cheesy for me, even for me, I should say. But if you don't want to bother and go around and collect lore books, Eye of the Flame or Elemental Storm. I haven't morphed this yet, but if you morph it, Eye of the Flame is going to be your go-to for being able to proc Burning Spell Weave here. So next up here, I'll be going through the champion points. So first up here we got the tower, and in here I've put some points into the Warlord. This is mainly so I can break free at a lower cost. Again, due to the fact that we're using Dark Conversion and or stamina recovery isn't the world's highest, so this will keep us running pretty well. And we'll be able to CC break at a lower cost than usual, obviously. Next up we got Siphoner. This will decrease our enemy's recovery by 7.71% for 3 seconds if you do light or heavy attacks. Yeah, so as long as you keep your light attacks going, which obviously you'll do, so you can proc Oblivion damage here, and you can proc your Drain Magicka Poison. If you just keep those light attacks coming from both sides when you bar switch, like just before you bar switch, you can do like an animation cancel light attack like this, and get that going, and you'll be able to proc both Siphoner and your enchantments and your poisons. So next up here we got Lover. In Lover here we got Arcanist, where I've put about 60 points here, and this is for Magicka recovery overall, and I've put 40 points into Mooncalf for stamina recovery. A bit less in here. These scale pretty poorly this patch, and that's also why you'll see me put spread points around a bit This can especially be seen here. So because these scale a bit poorly, you don't want to put 100 points into these. You just want to put like 60, 40, 30. Not too many, but not too little again. This is going to help you quite a lot. Putting points into these two, obviously. So next up, we've got Shadow. I've put 10 points into Shadow Ward. This is to reduce the cost of blocking. When are we blocking? We're blocking when we're getting faced with C-frags from enemy players. We're blocking when we're getting hit by meteors, or when we just need to get out of there and make sure we don't get stunned and die immediately. So blocking is really useful for a lot of situations. Don't perma-block. It's never a good idea to perma-block, unless you're built for it. But having a bit less cost will help us in the long run. Next up here we've got Tumbling. This scales really well. That's why I've put a lot of points into this. It reduces the cost of dodge rolling. This will help us again maintaining our stamina and not get too low. So we are a bit stamina efficient, as you can see. Points into stamina recovery, lower cost of blocking, lower cost of roll dodging, lower cost of CC breaking. So we have thought about maintaining our stamina so we can use Dark Conversion to convert some Magicka. Next up we've got the Apprentice, and we've got Elfborn here, 40 points. This is to increase the damage and healing done of our critical strikes and critical damage. This will help our overall burst to just deal increased damage. And this will actually help pretty well when you're using Light's Champion, because it'll increase your critical damage done by 15%. So 15 on top of 16 on top of the 38% spell critical I have, which is really just a nice combination. Plus, when you're using the healing ultimate, the 4k heal per second will actually sometimes crit, so this will give you a nice fat heal if it crits. Really, really cool. Next up here we've got Spell Erosion. This is our spell penetration. It's about 3k. Now, we do already have Sharpener on our front bar here and Defending on our back bar. Sharpen It will help us penetrate, as well as our light armor passives. So we'll be having a lot of penetration. As you can see here, we have 4,000, almost 5,000 on top of the 5,000 from this one. That's almost 10,000, maybe even more. On top of the 3,000, that's 13,000. Like, that's even more spell penetration than I have spell resistance. Okay, a bit less actually, but you get the idea. We have a lot of penetration if we spec into this, and that's why it's a really nice idea. It also stacks pretty well, so 35, 40 points into this. I would have put more points into it, but I did distribute them over here in the Atronach. So next up here we've got Elemental Expert. This is our overall damage. This stacks a bit worse than it did last patch, but I've still put about 50 points into it. Just to get that 10-11% extra damage done with my Magicka, Frost, Shock, and Flame damage abilities. And it's really nice, you know, to ward abilities that are using flame damage to proc spell waves. So next up here we got Master at Arms. This is what you really want to stack highly into. This stacks really well this patch, and it increases damage of all direct damage abilities. And these are damage abilities that are direct damage abilities. I think it's damage abilities that are not dots, so no damage over time. But I can definitely see direct damages being Haunting Curse, Endless Fury, Crystal Frags, Crushing Shock. Anything that deals upfront direct damage will get increased by this thing. And with this, like, 23% is such a significant amount. And you know, this will be added on top of the Elemental Expert and the Elfborn and Spell Erosion and all that. It'll just so much burst you can stack up together with this thing. So stack a lot of points into this. At least 70 is really, really nice. Next up we've got Staff Expert, 15 points into this. This is just to increase the damage of our light and heavy attacks. We are doing quite the amount of light attacks when we are trying to proc or enchants and poisons and so on. So if we keep the light attacks flowing, as well if we're using Siphoner here, it'll be dealing a bit more damage for the light attacks as well. So because we're using a lot of light attacks, you do want to put a few points into this. You could chop off some points. This is like, it's not necessary, but I like to put some points into this. But if you want to, take away these points, put them into Spell Erosion. That's where they're going to do the most good. Next up here we got Ritual. I've put no points into this, so I don't even know why I bother. Next up here we got Steed. Now I've put a bit less points into Resistance than I usually do. And it's because I found that my critical resistance was way too high. That's a very odd thing to say. But it kind of feels like it's mandatory to have at least 2000 spell critical. It doesn't work like that. If you don't get dealt physical damage to you, like if you're using damage shields, the critical resistance is not really going to do anything. This is only going to trigger once your damage shields are depleted, obviously, and your actual health get damaged. Which, if you're playing it correctly, it won't. So I wouldn't stack too much into this, since we're not going to take so much damage on our person, but our damage shields are going to be taking the damage for us. So I've only put 10 points into this just to have a bit extra resistance there. Then we got Ironclad. And by the way, you still want to look at having as many critical resistant pieces here, as many impenetrable as you can on your body. Even though I say you don't want too much of this, because the more impenetrable you can get on your body, the less champion points you'll have to spend into this thing. So next up here we got Ironclad. This is again something you want to stack severely into, because it reduces the damage taken against any direct damage abilities. This is the same thing I said for Master at Arms. These do the exact opposite things. This protects against direct damage, and Master at Arms increases direct damage. And because everyone is using direct damage abilities and Master at Arms, you do want to have a lot of points into Ironclad, so you can take some of that direct damage. This includes Nightblades, DKs, Sorcerers. They'll all be dealing direct damage. I don't know if Templars does with jabs, but if they do, watch out. Put some points into this. This is going to help you really well, and it stacks really, really well. As you can see, 50 points, 18.75%. Next up here we got the Lady. I've put some points into Hardy and Elemental Defender, as well as Thick-Skinned. Thick-Skinned, I've put a bit less into this because this acts for damage over time. It reduces the damage taken from damage over time. And now because we're using damage shields to take most of the pressure, we're not really going to feel the wrath of that damage over time on our person, but only on our damage shield, so this won't really... And again, damage over time, it's not too used by a lot of classes, and you know, you can't get about avoiding damage over time quite easily, so I've put a bit less points into this. It also scales pretty poorly as well. The same for these two. 27 points and 28 into Hardy and Elemental Defender here. This obviously decreases or reduces our damage taken from Frame Frost, Shock and Magic, and this reduces our damage taken from physical, poison and disease damage by respectively 7.2 or 7%. So you do want to keep a bit of points into these. These scale pretty poorly, as I said, so you do want to put more points into Ironclad, for example. But keep some points into this, they're still going to be pretty viable to use. So next up here we got Bastion. This is our main key to like huge damage shields. Put as many points as you can into this thing. Not necessarily 100, because if you put 100 it'll have 25%, and if you put 75 it'll have 23.4, so wasting 25 champion points on this just to get the last 2% is not worth it. But definitely put like 70 points into this thing here. It'll definitely help you, and it'll make your damage shields a lot bigger, and will make you able to hit that 20k stacked that you want to hit with the two wards you're using. So and then we just got here, we just got Elemental and Expert Defender here, and reduces our damage taken from light and heavy attacks, just because a lot of people are using Siphoner, and I know Nightblades especially are using a lot of Magicka Nightblades are using light attacks for proccing Spectral Bow. Even Stamblades are using it when animation cancelling, and light attacks deal more damage this patch than they did last patch. I can actually make my light attacks with a Flame Staff here hit for like 2 or 3k, so they'll be hitting you pretty hard, so having a bit of extra resistance in there is not too bad. So that's it for the build, guys. Thank you for watching. Please like, sub and comment, and I'll see you guys next time.